Hello everyone, good morning and welcome back to day 3 of IBPM Live. I'd like to thank Jose and the previous speakers for their really excellent insights into what best practice looks like in the world of IBPM. And I'd like to introduce you all to our next speaker, Rowan Teh, who is the founder of Boxfish, a business process management software business based out of Auckland in New Zealand. So continuing with the theme of going all around the world. He's a career consultant with over 20 years of management and technology consulting experience at director level positions with the Big Four and global consulting firms. His absolute passion is bringing together lean and software development to enable organizations to be lean enterprises. Welcome, Rowan, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Brian, and good morning, everyone. So my topic that I'm going to be presenting over the next half hour is titled Transform into a Lean Enterprise to Focus on Customer Value in Times of Uncertainty. And certainly we're facing a time of uncertainty in today's climate. Just to kind of reiterate in terms of my background, as Brian mentioned, so I'm definitely a passionate person when it comes to business process management, intelligence business process management. I come from a background of being a practitioner of Lean Six Sigma, and now I'm, as Brian mentioned, founded a new business called Boxfish, which is a software business. I'm pretty excited at this current stage of business process management evolution, we'll call it, because what I'm seeing in the industry is more integration, I guess, between the two worlds of business process improvement as well as Lean Six Sigma and software development all sort of coming into play together at this time. And certainly in this presentation, what I'm going to be going through is how I see the world coming together in terms of the establishment of what's known as a lean enterprise. And that certainly seems to be a trend that's happening in the industry at the moment as well. So it goes without saying that businesses are facing very uncertain times. A little while ago, I just did a bit of a Google search on job losses in 2020, and you get over 300 million results. And obviously, I didn't check every single one, but there is a lot of businesses that are suffering at the moment. And but regardless of the current, COVID-19 environment, the prediction for the market and economic climate for this year and in the future, in the immediate future, the research analysts have actually been saying over the last year or so that they were predicting times were going to be tough for businesses. If you look at a couple of research findings here in front of you, I'll quote from Gartner's Global CEO survey last year that they highlighted that economic slowdown was going to be one of the top CEO concerns. And as a result, CEOs actually rank improving productivity and efficiency as amongst one of the top strategic business priorities for them this year and in the immediate period to come as well. So IDC, International Data Corporation, their research was also quite consistent with Gartner's research in the sense that their findings from a study was that the top transformational goals for businesses are going to be focusing on optimizing and simplifying business processes. So as opposed to in the past where a lot of businesses have big growth plans, I think a lot more of the focus is now internal about how can we deliver to clients better, faster, cheaper than ever before, and how can we protect as businesses our core businesses and our core value that we're trying to drive towards customers. So the question that I have, I guess, when I see a lot of this kind of research is really, are companies actually going to invest more into business process management? Now, I'll quote from APQC, American Productivity and Quality Center, some research that they came up with in the last year as well, which was that their findings was that 54% of organizations are going to be investing in end-to-end processes over the next 18 months. Question being why? By investing in end-to-end processes, businesses are able to link what they do in terms of processes more directly with customer value. So that was 63% said that. And you know that when we talk about customer value, that's kind of lean 101 in terms of starting off with the customer in mind. What value do you want to drive towards the customer? The second finding, I guess, from that study as well is that by focusing on end-to-end processes, you're able to create more sustainable process improvement. So, you know, I've worked with organizations in my consulting career where they've got me involved in looking at a particular pain point within their business, but often what happens is the root cause of those pain points actually doesn't reside in where they thought it resides, and not in that particular area of the business. A lot of times the root cause happens in other parts of the business. So without that end-to-end process view, you may miss exactly where some of those root causes to pain points come from, more upstream in the process. And then some other, I guess, benefits of looking at end-to-end processes as well is that obviously it breaks down operational silos. And it helps move organizations from more of a functional-based organization towards more process-based. And what that allows a company to do is have, you know, when you look at end-to-end processes and mapping those out, you're not really considering the organizational structure in mind. You're looking at the customer value and what are all the activities that as a business you need to execute in order to drive that customer value. So, you know, when you look at end-to-end processes, you don't have all the restrictions of what the silos or the various departments in your business may have. I thought this was quite interesting as well from the same report and study from APQC, which was in terms of where businesses are actually going to be investing in terms of inside their business. It tends to be more processes to do with request to service. So that customer interaction end of their business seems to be where companies are more interested in looking for understanding how they do things from a process perspective, what kind of improvements they can drive at as well. And that's obviously quite consistent with the other finding on the left-hand side there in terms of making sure that you're able to link processes to that customer value. But I guess, you know, as it's one thing for companies to know that they need to improve productivity and efficiencies in this current time of uncertainty. And it's also, you know, and it's dependent on them actually improving processes end to end. But the odds are simply stacked against them when it comes to actually succeeding in a lot of process improvement exercises. So as practitioners, we're very familiar with some of these percentage failure rates. So Bain & Company reported last year that a lot of times with process improvements, there's an 80% failure rate to drive value. There's also a 74% failure rate to gain competitive edge. McKinsey quoted that just for general complex and large-scale change programs, there's about a 70% failure rate. And they also mentioned that, you know, the most important or the most difficult part of process improvements is actually not about what to do, but how to do it. And employees often fall back into their old ways of working. And these type of process improvement initiatives tends to fizzle out before you even get to the point of implementing some of the improvements there. So it's one thing to recognize that you, as a business, you need to improve your productivity and all the rest, but it's another to actually do it right in a way that actually allows for that sustainable continuous improvement. And I guess if you drill down now on some of the key reasons why this is these failures actually take place, if we go back to APQC, some of the top 3 reasons from a survey that they conducted in the past year, the first one was really a lack of that ongoing continuous improvement after you do the process improvement exercise. So we've all been there before where there's a lot of focus, a lot of energy during a process improvement exercise or a lean event, a Kaizen event, all these type of exercises. But and at the end of them, you come up with a whole bunch of recommendations for improvements, but then the project team members disband. The business people go back to their day jobs. Consultants, if you're using consultants, tend to go back, to their next engagements. So a lot of times that energy disappears, and that's really when the start of the journey should happen in terms of process improvements, but it just doesn't take place. The second finding from APQC was the lack of frameworks to actually build process models or maps in process improvement exercises. So a lot of people think that just producing a process map is delivering business process management, whereas the actual artifact, in my experience, of a process map, other than for training purposes, doesn't really give you a lot more, any more value than just a whole bunch of boxes and arrows on a piece of paper. And certainly in the last 20 years of my career doing a lot of process improvements, what I've seen is that what we used to do was create a lot of process maps on A3 sheets and put them in 3-ring binders, just for all of those to be stored away somewhere and never to be seen again. And all we've really done over the years is actually convert from paper-based to digitizing these process maps. But really the value of the actual process map themselves is still questionable. Other main reasons being that a lot of times that these documents are static. They don't continue to live and breathe. They don't have any rich data to kind of show how your processes are actually performing post your current states. And the third point from APQC, in terms of a reason for failures as well, is that there's an inability to actually capture ROI and performance measures on improvements. So a lot of times, I kind of call this the squeaky wheel gets their way in the workshop or in the room. So often the list of improvements that come out of these process improvement exercises, the motivating factor to actually move forward for these improvements, there's not necessarily an ROI captured against them. And the real root cause of some of these, for the reason why that's the case, is that trying to tie an improvement back down to the actual cost savings and the effort savings at a process level is very difficult to do often without a systematic way of doing that. And even if you're able to do that, the ongoing tracking of that ROI is also very challenging as well. So the challenges that I've kind of mentioned so far, in my view, has led to now a rebirth of lean that's happening in the industry, and this is titled Lean Enterprise. In the Gartner report that I mentioned earlier, they even quote that organizations need to lean up for more efficiency and scale. So if you take a step back and look at the evolution of lean since its introduction in the early 90s, the 90s were all about implementing lean in the manufacturing industries, whereas in the 2000 period, and that was certainly when I got involved in lean and Six Sigma, lean then was applied more in service industries, right? People were quite skeptical back then about implementing lean in services because it originated from manufacturing, but certainly the principles of lean in terms of understanding value to the customer, value streaming, flow, all of those things still cannot be applied in services. And really in the last 10 years, lean again hasn't really gone away. The principles of lean is very much in the foundation of such approaches as agile and DevOps if you work in the software IT space. And now what we're seeing is the next real rebirth of lean in terms of the consideration of lean in terms of lean enterprises. And really the biggest evolution that we're seeing here is actually the emergence of a lot of digital solutions and tools and systems that can now help facilitate the lean way of working and the lean mindset in organizations. So let's just dive into this a little bit deeper now. So I'm going to throw this out there that traditional ways of doing lean is actually not very lean in itself. And you're probably saying, what on earth is Rowan talking about here? Well, let's go through a typical type of lean event, a process improvement event. So we're all very familiar with getting a whole bunch of stakeholders into a room and doing your typical brown paper wall exercise in the workshop. And in this, on this brown piece of paper, we're putting a lot of post-it notes in terms of the various steps to go through a particular process. What is value added steps, what is waste steps, all those kind of nice things. Now, the challenge of doing an exercise like this is if we would, it's dependent on everyone being in the same room. And take this conference, for example, we're all joining remotely, and I think, this is going to be more and more the norm moving forward. So how do you now facilitate a session like this when everyone's joining remotely? Certainly, if I was to put a whole bunch of post-it notes on my wall behind me, chances are you're not going to really be able to see that very clearly. So there needs to be a better way of facilitating these type of sessions, especially as with globalization and a lot of people being located in all over the place. The second thing that happens generally in these process improvements is that you collect a whole bunch of data in terms of cycle times and steps, lead times, again, percentage of steps that are value adding, percentage of steps that are non-value adding, all the rest. And if you're like me, typically I have to resort back to a spreadsheet as a way of actually analyzing a lot of this information. It can be time consuming, it's complex, and certainly if I'm going to be doing it, it's probably going to be prone to human error, especially translating from post-it notes back into a spreadsheet. So there has to be a better way of doing this. And the third part is that obviously we need to document what we do in terms of the current state processes, the future state processes, and typically we have to resort to tools like Visio, for example, PowerPoint, Word, different ways of actually documenting these process flows as a way of communicating back. Now, the challenges with this is depending on who the author is, the standards may be different, the stencils may be different. And again, going back to my earlier point, a lot of times these artifacts just don't add a lot of value post producing them. We always say that they should live and breathe, but often they don't. They just get filed away, either in 3-ring binders, which is how I started my journey on this type of work, or now digital sense, but still again filed away in some folder located in some shared drive somewhere. So the actual value is still very questionable there. And ultimately, I guess with a lot of these process improvements, they stop, and this is the going back to my continuous improvement point before, at the end of these type of exercises, that's really when the journey should start. But because there's no ongoing systematic way of continuing to track the performance of your processes, given the improvements that you're going to make, often things just tend to stop in terms of the actual implementation of those improvements. So in my view, what IBPM solutions provide is the ability to enable businesses to have a tool that first of all capture customer value and value stream. So going back to the APQC point of not having frameworks as part of a lot of these process improvements exercises, the ability to use IBPM solution is that it often is designed around some sort of framework, whether it's Lean or Six Sigma or some other type of process improvement methodology. So unlike traditional process mapping tools that you may use, the whole idea is that an IBPM tool will actually allow you to first force you to think about your high-level value streams, your value chain, and then drill down into each one of those value streams into the processes and start capturing data against that. So it's very rich in data that you can then analyze. So whether you're an executive level team member that wants a bird's eye view of your entire value chain and how you're performing in terms of your productivity and your efficiency, or you're at an operational level, just trying to understand, what processes you execute at a task level, an IBPM solution should give you that whole decomposition in your process hierarchy there. Yeah, I personally work with a number of utilities companies here in New Zealand, and in utilities, asset management is obviously a very key function of their business. It's all about maintaining power lines or the transmission distribution network, what have you. And the ability to use an IBPM solution in this industry is that it helps you break down from asset management to your various processes, whether it's routine maintenance, corrective maintenance, preventative maintenance processes, and being able to see how you're performing in terms of your productivity and efficiency levels within those processes, so you can easily decompose from asset management down to the processes there and drill down and actually see what your performance levels are like. Now, the other thing I want to mention here in terms of these solutions is that the key application of lean here is being able to force the user and the business to think about that customer value first, and driving, what is it that you're driving at from a business perspective to deliver that customer value, and then working backwards on the customer value to then what value streams that you actually need to execute to deliver that customer value. So another example here, I worked with a client in the last year where they asked me to fix their invoice billing process. Now, for many, if any of you have ever worked in billing, that you'll probably know that a lot of the issues when it comes to invoice billing actually isn't the root causes doesn't lie in the actual billing process. Often the root causes of these problems tend to happen upstream in the process. For example, if you're onboarding a customer and you accidentally put in the wrong address for that customer, guaranteed that invoice that when it comes to billing isn't going to get to that customer. So without that entire end-to-end view, that value streaming view of things, to try and fix a problem in one area of the business, you may miss where that root cause lies somewhere else upstream in the process there. And that's where IBPM solutions allow you to actually see that kind of end-to-end view of your business. The second part is, what sets, I think, IBPM solutions different from, say, traditional BPM tools is the ability to measure and analyze data. So going back to my starting slide, that organizations need to improve productivity and efficiency, the key question here is, how do businesses even know what their current productivity and efficient levels are today? In reality, most businesses may not know, and IBPM solutions provides this ability to be able to not only capture these measures, but drill down to the data in terms of the processes to surface up these measures to users. IBPM solutions also consider different branches of a process. So what I mean by that is, if you consider a lead time for a process end to end, often there'll be multiple lead times if you're trying to measure how long does it take to get through a process. Depending on the number of decisions that happen in that process, there'll be a number of different branches that happen. Each one of those branches may result in a different lead time to another branch. So again, traditional BPM tools may provide this mapping, but the ability to actually capture data end to end for the different lead times is very challenging. So that's where, when it comes to intelligent BPM solutions, it can consider all of these different branches and the different volumes, splits that you may have at these different decisions there. So surfacing this data helps the lean principle of flow. So the whole idea around wanting to do business process management is also trying to make decisions on the actual processes. Where can I invest money to reduce cost, reduce effort? So without that data surfacing up when you're looking at processes, it's very hard to make that call. So the idea around flow is very much ingrained in intelligence business process management solutions, because it's about enabling a decision maker to have the data required to decide where is my biggest bang for my buck in terms of my investment decisions there. Now, the other thing that is happening within IBPM as well is the data that I'm mentioning in terms of cycle times, for example, where effort lies in processes. Unlike traditional methods of needing the user to input, how long it takes to do things, or you may need to actually do like a time and motion study to actually capture how long it takes for people to execute certain tasks. The exciting thing with IBPM solutions is the ability to tap into source systems. So a number of medium to large enterprises use ERP, enterprise resource planning software, for example, SAP, Oracle, Dynamics, Microsoft Dynamics, you name it. All of these applications also capture data in terms of how long it takes for certain steps or processes to be executed. So where IBPM solution comes into play is it can actually tap into these different data sources as a way of extracting that data directly into your value streams and your processes. So now there's an objective, the data that you capture is more objective than relying on people telling you, how long on average it takes to actually execute certain tasks. And that provides also the ability for your processes in your IBPM solution to continue to live and breathe and be dynamic, because as your ERP systems or what have you, your source systems continue to capture data, it continuously refreshes that in your processes in your IBPM solution. And lastly, when it comes to IBPM solutions, what it ultimately gives you is the ability for that continuous improvement. So where businesses tend to stop with a lot of these initiatives and finish at a kind of future state that still needs to be executed, the IBPM solution, the idea around these systems is that it allows you to continue to ongoing monitoring and tracking of how your processes are performing. So this will give you the overall tracking of how well you're doing in terms of your productivity and efficiency levels. If you're executive member, having that bird's eye view of your business and your percentage efficiencies across your areas of your business is very, very powerful to have, because the ability to then drill down within each of these capabilities or functions or value streams into the very steps of those processes gives you that end-to-end view is very important. For general staff, these solutions are also very useful in the sense that it encourages a culture of continuous improvement, motivating people to be able to continue to track the improvements and see that reduction of time and efficiency into process in terms of those processes. And this is obviously very useful from a performance management perspective as well with your staff. You can actually embed it into the KPIs and all the rest in terms of motivating more improvements to come in the future. So in general, this has been, IBPM solutions is generally a great communication tool throughout the business. And to that, I think that's one of my last points here. So just in conclusion here, again, my business is called Boxfish. We are an IBPM and process mining software business. We're located here in beautiful New Zealand, and we've got partners in the US. If you'd like to contact me, these are my details here, along with the business details there as well. So feel free to contact me after this presentation if you've got any questions around IBPM solutions or just generally about this presentation as well. So at this stage, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Brian.
Thank you very much indeed, Rowan. That was very insightful and very enjoyable, and that would appear to be shared by the audience. So I have some questions which hopefully you'll be able to answer as we move forward from there. So first of all, let me start with one, which is first of all a bit of praise, saying a great presentation. But the query is really around how do you deal with individuals who don't believe in process mapping, and yet you are trying to sort of implement software, get ROI, and are thinking about ways to make the business more successful. That's obviously a challenge which a lot of individuals face in this sector. How do you have any sort of suggestions, ideas, pointers in that direction?
I think in general, this kind of stakeholder management resistance is generally a change. I'd say it's actually broader than just process improvement. I think a lot of times this is just goes back to organizational change management. And I think, to motivate anyone to do anything, it has to go back to what's in it for me. And it has to go back to the individual level, at least from my experience. So unless you're able to communicate, the benefits and the value of doing something back to that individual, it is challenging to get them over the line and actually doing something. So, one of my last points in my presentation there is actually using processes as a way of, motivating you employees to actually look for more and more improvements, to kind of build that culture of change. And really, you need to incentivize staff or employees to be able to do this. So having measures that motivate them to look for improvements and incentivizing them to look for those improvements is one way of getting them over the line, because they can see a direct benefit to them if they actually do engage with using a system to actually look at either documenting their processes or looking for ways of improvement. I mean, ultimately, it has to go back to what drives that individual, and how can you motivate them, and through incentivizing them to create that change. That's one point. Another incentive that often I see companies using is just from a self-development perspective, to be able to train people in process improvements and upskill them is a really great skill set to have, and it's not unique to any particular industry. It's a skill set that they can continue with post those improvements.
Fantastic.
That answers
Thank
that
you.
Question.
Obviously, if it hasn't, then I'm sure they'll pick it up with you post-event, Brian. Moving on to the next one from Mark. Do the current IBPM systems have the capability to import the BPM artifacts created under the original BPM initiatives, i.e. process maps, narratives, etc.?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. You can actually import a lot of these artifacts. It depends what kind of formats and all the rest, but yeah, most of them actually do allow you to actually bring that as a starting point. Certainly what we're doing in our business in Boxfish is actually creating a number of different templates that's available for businesses to kick them off in this journey. So rather than have to start with a blank sheet of paper and start modeling things from scratch, we're actually creating certain templates depending on the industry. Utilities, for example, was one that I mentioned a lot of my experience in. So we actually have a starting point in terms of, what are the typical type of process hierarchies that you would have in that particular industry. So by doing that, clients are, expedites and accelerates the time it takes to actually build these things out. But certainly importing a lot of these artifacts is a standard feature. The other thing I also mentioned before was the ability to integrate these solutions into source systems, because it's one thing to actually bring in the models, it's another to keep it alive and feed it data in terms of, what are the cycle times within each of those steps. So IBPM solutions have that integration point into your source systems now, and that's certainly a feature that we've developed within our solution as well, that you can then map things into transactional systems that has that kind of actual data today.
Well, Mark, I hope that provides you some feedback on that. If you have a follow-up to that, please let me know. Mike asks, what are the prerequisites for an IBPM solution implementation success? He's not familiar with IBPM tools, but it seems to him that unless you have a very robust ERP or alternatively process management tool already in place, the IBPM tool cannot automatically measure and analyze waste in processes. What would be your thoughts on that?
I'd say it's 50-50 on my side. I'd say I kind of agree and disagree in some ways as well, only in the sense that, yes, without any source systems, you need to, as a human being, to feed it with the data. So that's in some ways I agree with that point. Obviously, having an ERP system or source systems automates a lot of that data entry because it's feeding the IBPM solution, but the actual analysis part can be automated. So once the data is in there, you needing to do your typical lean analysis and calculating what percentage is waste and what percentage is not, what is my overall lead time, what are the different cycle times and all the rest. That kind of analysis can be done automatically, and I think that's a big selling point to these solutions, is that a lot of times when you go through a process improvement exercise, a lot of the effort is actually the documentation of it and the actual analysis of that information. So that analysis part, IBPM solutions out of the box does give you that. However, you're right in terms of the source systems. If you have those source systems, that could be a good prerequisite in terms of data feeding it. Without it, you can still feed it manually in terms of the data, and that's where I kind of mentioned before, you know, going back to good old time and motion studies. I know nowadays people don't really do that kind of thing anymore, but you know, in absence of any system tracking time, kind of have to go back to some of these exercises in order to get that data of what's actually happening out in the workplace. I
Fantastic.
think, sorry, Brian.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so the other things I think in terms of prerequisites is, you know, technology at the end of the day is only one factor in terms of making things successful. The old age rule of processes, people, and technology, those trifecta, is very much still in play when you're implementing an IBPM solution. Going back to the earlier question, you definitely need to bring people on board, which is more than just selling a solution, is selling them the journey of what you're trying to achieve in terms of process improvements, and also selling the what's in it for me, as mentioned before. So I think those are prerequisites as well in terms of doing these things. And then going back to the APQC study as well, teaching people about the framework that you're using in order to do process improvement. So whether you're following Lean, Six Sigma, or a combination of both, you know, instilling that education to people is vitally important. Otherwise, if you start asking people what is waste as you're populating these tools, people won't get it. They won't understand what you're even talking about. Or what is a value stream? They may not even understand what that is. So the education around you know, a lot of these principles is vitally important as a prerequisite as well. Sorry, Brian.
Hey, not a problem. And thank you, Mike, for responding to Rowan's answers. Just so you know, Rowan, he's commented a fair response. Data collection has proven to be his greatest challenge to date. So thank you for the insight. Moving on to a query from Cameron. Have you seen cases where machine learning and AI can be incorporated into IBPM, especially in the future state design and sustainability phase of a lean deployment? Any use cases you can share with us?
So personally, I see IBPM solutions extending beyond that of just the modeling part, but also into the automation part. So, you know, I've worked with clients where as a prerequisite to implementing an RPA tool, for example, you use IBPM solution as a way of documenting and modeling your processes and to clean up your processes before then automating it into, say, an automation tool. You know, I think once you're able to clean up, I think one of the challenges, I think, whenever you're looking at you know, a system implementation or automating any kind of process is to give time to actually clean your processes and create an optimum state when it comes to those processes first. And that's where IBPM solution very much comes into play in terms of giving you the ability to create, you know, remove any inefficiencies first. Because the risk otherwise of automating a lot of these processes is that it's garbage in, garbage out. All you're doing is automating, you know, inefficient processes. So I think that's the area and kind of the use cases that I see with the IBPM solution is that it creates that opportunity to create those efficient processes first before then moving into say the likes of an RPA tool. Now, in terms of machine learning, I guess the whole idea around keeping your processes dynamic and evolving is the ability to continuously reflect on those processes and learn from it. So, you know, the decisions, just now I was talking about in the process having decisions, and whenever there's a decision, there's basically a split in the process. Now, what machine learning can give you is an understanding of what is the general you know, volume of times that a process goes one way versus the other. So rather than having to manually decide you know, what the volume counts is, that's where machine learning would be very useful in terms of being able to give you that data point in terms of, okay, actually what we're seeing in terms of the regularity of a process is that it's actually going via this branch in this decision more than another branch, and that's a good learning when it comes to calculating, what is the what's the typical lead time for a process. Generally, machine learning would give you that data point of, okay, majority of the time it's actually going one way versus the other.
Fantastic, thank you for that, Rowan. And Anna has a question. Can you use IBPM in aviation?
You can use IBPM solutions in pretty much all industry, I would say. I don't think IBPM solutions is unique to any kind of one industry. The IBPM solution gives you the ability to facilitate any kind of process decomposition. So whether it's aviation or whether it's something, another industry like utilities, as I mentioned, or what have you, all industries have processes. And there's an understanding of a customer and what is it that you're trying to drive towards in terms of value to that customer. So certainly you can populate any kind of process library within the IBPM solution and find efficiencies in those processes. So absolutely, I think aviation would be is applicable.
Fine, and I think there's a couple of last questions, but one I would really like to get your views on is, where do you see the future of IBPM going?
Yeah, so actually the question before about data sources is where I kind of see where it's going more and more. I think right now where IBPM solutions are, it tends to, a lot of them tend to only tap into one or two different data sources. I think where I can see IBPM solutions going is that the ability to actually tap into multiple data sources from all over the place, and not just internal data sources, say from ERPs, but even external data sources. If you're wanting to capture what is value to the customer, a lot of times these sentiments come from market research information data sources. So where I can see IBPM solutions going is the ability to actually act as almost like a business intelligence tool to be able to tap into all sorts of different data sources. And that's where I bridge the gap, where IBPM solutions and process mining is converging more and more, because the whole idea is that you want to keep these processes alive. And the way I see that happening is to make sure that it's very rich in the data that it provides you.
Rowan, it's been a hugely enlightening and enjoyable session. Before you go, is there one last nugget that you would like to share with the audience that they can walk away with as things that they could almost immediately do when they get back to their business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing is, any kind of process improvement initiative starts with, first of all, understanding your customer value. Again, going back to my original objective of this presentation, businesses are certainly in times of uncertainty at the moment, and I think a lot of businesses need to protect their core business. And the way of doing that is to make sure that whatever is driving them in terms of within their business starts from the customer in mind. So making sure that that customer value is very, very clear, and then working backwards on that into the kind of value streams that happen within the business. I think that's probably the biggest thing right now is, a lot of times companies start inward looking first and then outward. So what I'm suggesting here is definitely just remind yourself as a business, what is your ultimate customer value, and what is it that you do as a business to enable that? Because everything else in lean terms is waste.
Rowan, thank you very much for that, and I appreciate you staying up in the very early hours of the morning. If you haven't realised yet, Rowan is joining us from New Zealand, and I think it's about 4 o'clock in the morning your time.
Just coming up 4 o'clock, so that's all good.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for your time, and with that, I'll close your presentation. Take care.
Thank you very much, Brian. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, the next session starts at midday, 12 o'clock Eastern time. You simply go and check into the link that you've been provided already. We have another exciting presentation coming up from Faisal Villani from O'Connor. which is focusing on digital transformation, why, where, how, and what. I know from a number of the conversations that I have with individuals on a daily basis, just the word digital transformation generates a lot of different thoughts and views. So we look forward to seeing you back here at midday, and hope that you enjoyed that very forthright session from Rowan. Take care.